Yeah, so we were just talking about this. Something occurred to me this morning. I've been listening to a lot of games people play, Eric Barron and all this stuff. And, like, you know, watching people's behavior in the midst of, what would you call it? High stress. See, that's the interesting thing, though, is that high stress is a thing virtually all the time. The majority of people that are surrounding you at a given moment are fairly likely to be experiencing some level of stress. Do you know what I'm saying? When things are normal. But there seems to be something that happens when everybody or some large portion of the population is stressed about a similar thing, or they're stressed about something that's connected to a similar thing. Somebody's worried about toilet paper, somebody's worried about their job, somebody's worried about their kids, somebody's worried about their grandparents, somebody's worried about, you know, for someone, the sort of lingering existential dread that exists just behind the psychological curtain, you know, the veil of sanity is now kind of pushing out into their awareness. But it's all related to a single kind of current event or a single issue around which there's this cluster of current events about whether they're doing things right, and look what someone said, and oh my God, the worst leader ever, and oh my God, look at these people, and the economy's going to this and that and the other thing. And it just occurred to me that in moments like this, things that are always true, I think, are laid particularly bare to anyone who's really paying attention and ready to look. And one of the things for me is I'm kind of observing people that I kind of know at different levels and in different capacities. Some of them are people with whom I've worked, some of them are casual acquaintances, some of them are, well, what I would consider fairly close friends, people that I know pretty well. Some of them are actually kind of a combination of those things because of just overlap and stuff. And it's becoming very clear to me that if my life script, what we might call my preconscious life plan, these things that exist mostly outside of my awareness, that were kind of formed as a result of early life experiences, parental programming, injunctions and prohibitions, right? I observed, and I mean, I think we do absorb what we observe, you know, in some sense. What I observed when I was growing up about how adults feel in times of stress, how adults feel when things are going wrong, and this is the interesting thing too. Well, my mom was a Republican and I'm very much a progressive Democrat. Well, that's great, but I bet your mom still taught you how to feel about people that don't share your political views. And I bet your mom told you how to perceive and to experience people who you regard as irresponsible or insane or out of touch with reality or unethical or whatever. You know what I'm saying? You know, the interesting thing about that, I really think that everyone that's kind of a political, kind of a sort of highly charged political person and who derives a lot of experiential payoff from their politics versus someone who's interested in politics because they're interested in it, but someone who is validating an existential position, right, through their kind of political model of reality, and people who are deriving a lot of what you might call existential payoff, a lot of, whether they're positive or negative emotions, but they, I mean, think about that. The number of people for whom their interest in and the attention that they pay to politics provides them with intense emotional experiences that they otherwise would not be having. Think about that. Do you think that's a large portion of the population? Do you think that for some percentage of that large portion of the population that is deriving significant emotional payoffs from their interest in politics and current events, do you think that some percentage of that portion, their engagement with politics, is more about that emotional payoff than it is about any ostensibly rational interest that they have or reason that they have for being interested in it, right? And if the answer to that is no, I don't think so. I think people are just genuinely and sincerely and autonomously and awarely concerned of what's going on. I think you underestimate the human being's capacity, one, to be programmed, and two, to be profoundly duplicitous in the manner in which they carry out that programming, and in the manner in which they go about deriving secondary gains from plausibly deniable, social level, rational exchanges, concerns, preoccupations, interests, etc., right? And so if my life script calls for me to experience certain kind of racket emotions, indignation or fear or superiority or inferiority or I'm not okay, I mean, or they're not okay, or you're not okay, or anyone who just is kind of programmed to be very parental in their relationships to other people. Maybe they saw their parents disapprove of people a lot. Well, have you seen the amount of disapproval, parental disapproval, that has been manifesting on social media and on the news and in actual real life interactions as a result of this stuff? Oh, you're not doing this. Oh, you're getting too much toilet paper. You're standing too close to this person. You're not concerned about that. Oh, you support so-and-so. They did this and they're not concerned about that. And that's evil and bad. I mean, it's all this tut-tutting, finger-wagging bullshit. And people are getting off on it. They are getting off. They have an existential boner because they're getting to play out all of this fucking shit that they're programmed to do. And they've got a wonderful, totally justifiable, unassailable, ostensible crisis, right? That's providing them the perfect context for doing it. And the interesting thing about that is that Republicans and Democrats are liberals and conservatives, whatever, they're all finding ultimate justification in doing whatever it is that they've already been programmed to do and think and feel in relationship to the world and to society, to politics and other people. Isn't that interesting? That they're all, although at the content level sort of ideologically opposed, and maybe their opinion about the severity of the situation is different and incompatible, and yet they're all deriving emotional gains from it. The indignation or the outrage, or that superior sophistication of seeing things that other people aren't able to see, or having that insider special knowledge about it that changes. You know what I'm saying? And it's interesting to me the amount of that seems to be going on, and the number of people, the percentage of people that seem to be engaging in that kind of behavior, and the percentage of people that seem to be totally unaware of the fact that's happening. Totally unaware. Are you aware of the fact that you're deriving some kind of an emotional payoff from doing this stuff? Are you aware of that sense of, what is it? It's kind of a deep, it's not pleasure necessarily, it's more of a satisfaction, it's a solidification of basic fundamental identity, and a solidification of one's convictions. Like, if I'm convinced I'm not okay, and then I get some evidence that seems to confirm that for me, like, I may not like that feeling, but there is a kind of affirmative, sort of an affirmation. There's an element there that's kind of like, yep. When I have a pre-existing conviction and that conviction is confirmed, there's a sort of a sense of deep settling that is, in some senses, satisfying, that provides a sensation of security. And it's security that's not derived from believing nice things about reality. It's a security that's derived from believing that what I believe about reality is basically accurate, that the answer that I put down on the examination about what is and what's true was correct, and I'm going to get a check and not an X. I'm not going to have to erase it and worry about eraser marks, and tearing the paper and all that kind of weird stuff when you got to revise something, you know what I mean? And you're concerned that it's going to be clear, or someone else is going to see you revising it, or it's going to be obvious that it was a revision, or you're conceding to someone that you got in a heated argument with, or whatever. And so there's a lot of that happening. And I think that one of the things that's really interesting is that, and I can just hear the objections that you don't understand. This is a serious situation. I'm not saying it's not a serious situation. What I'm saying is that a lot of people are unconsciously and unintentionally exploiting what may or may not be a serious situation in order to generate inside themselves emotions that they learned how to generate, and they learned to generate as a result of having parents that were effed up in the way their parents were. That's different. And if that's happening and you're not aware of it, it might be useful, right? If this is me we're talking about, if it's happening and I'm not aware of it, it might be useful for me to become aware of it so that I can see to what extent is my experience intrinsic to what's happening, and to what extent is my experience the byproduct of how I have been programmed, right, to experience this type of thing. And maybe I haven't been programmed to experience this specific type of thing in a specific way, but maybe I have been enjoined to do certain things and prohibited from doing certain other things. And I've got this strange matrix of prohibitions and injunctions and patterns and skills and blind spots and all that. And I'm doing my best at a kind of squishy neurological level to reconcile all these things. Must go here, but this door is locked, have to go around, but can't take too long, so I've got to do da-da-da and all this. And the net result is what it's like to be me in the face of all this shit, And I just think that it's like you can have, and this always happens, right? Because the thing is that the most dysfunction and most of the manifestations of what's dysfunctional about me will be justifiable in light of what's happening nowadays, what's going on currently, in light of the current situation. And the fact that it's justifiable considering those things doesn't change the fact that it's bullshit that's not serving me, or that it's a manifestation of bullshit that's not serving me, right? And so for a lot of people, when they take that out, I become highly suspicious, because what they're saying is true and irrelevant. And when a person says something to you that's true and irrelevant, they're bullshitting you as an extension of having bullshit themselves, right? There's this thing that's happening where they're trying to weasel their way out of a realization that they know is coming by uttering irrelevancies, basically. Yeah, that's right. But you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so one of the things for me is, if you're only willing to deal with your patterns when your patterns are manifesting themselves in isolation, or when they're manifesting themselves in a context that provides zero justification whatsoever for you to manifest those things, you're never going to deal with your problems, because these things are very clever. They come out when there's a reason. Do you know what I'm saying? And because you were taught, right, to pick a fight with your significant other when you have some chance of making a good case against them. You know, you were taught to feel not okay about yourself when your combination of persuasiveness and credulity would interact in a way that would result in you being able to really believe that feeling. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And that's one of those things too. And there's all these different ways that you can convince yourself that how you're feeling right now is the only way to feel, in spite of the fact that you don't want to feel that way. You can slide your self-persuasion dial up, or you can slide your credulity dial up, or you can slide them both up. You know what I'm saying? There's all these different things. And then when you start talking to me, you slide your self-persuasion up and your credulity way down. You know what I'm saying? There's all these interesting little tricks that you can play in order to keep yourself locked into places where you don't want to be. But the question is, why are you doing that? And do you want to keep doing that? And is there something else that you'd rather be doing instead? And so recognizing that you can have a grain of truth. Like, for example, what everyone's talking about right now may result in your demise, right? That's I mean, maybe we're not talking about some kind of a virus. Maybe we're talking about, nuclear proliferation, right? Maybe that's the concern. Or the existential threat of global warming and climate change, right? But whatever. Like, you take this stuff, and perhaps there's some truth to the fact that this, at some point, may cause a legitimate, real problem for you, right, in your practical life. Like, you may have to do something you don't want to do, not be able to do something that you want to do or need to do or whatever as a result of this thing everyone's talking about. That's not really relevant. What's relevant is how you're using this right now to affirm basic existential positions and all of this. And you can have this grain of truth that sort of passes through this psychological veil. Like, there's a fact that's really true at an adult level. It's rational, logical to be concerned about this or interested in this topic or whatever. And that little kind of tiny grain of truth pierces the psychological veil and creates a little pinhole. And through that pinhole passes essentially an infinite quantity of psychological garbage that is going to spew into what it's like to be you, into your experience. And it's going to just, it's kind of like, what's it, like you let the camel put its nose in the tent because it's cold, and then before you know it, the whole camel is in the tent. You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. And I think the thing is, can I watch what it's like to be me? Can I watch what I'm doing? Can I just get really skeptical about things that I'm convinced about? Can I become skeptical of how convinced I am? And can I look at my objections to doing that? Oh, but it's true. Oh, but it's science. Well, it's the science. It's the experts say blah 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 blah. Okay, that's fine. And maybe it's correct. How are you using that data, and how are you using that fact in a subjective way? Because that's one of those things, is that people, they do this thing where they say, well, I'm behaving in a way that is consistent with what the experts suggest. And that is their justification for indulging in all manner of harmful, internal, psychological, emotional games that they're playing with themselves. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And the question is there something I want to do about that? Do I want to be more in control of because I don't have a problem with bad feelings. I have a problem, though, with bad feelings that I'm feeling because I saw someone else feeling them, and my brain said, okay, that when this happens, you feel this way. That bothers me. or when I'm feeling bad because some authority figure, right, felt that it was important that someone like me feel bad when something like that happens. I laughed at the funeral, or I laughed in the presence of my great aunt who was dying of cancer, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Whatever the story is. And I got a stern look or a harsh rebuke or something like that from somebody. And as a result of that, I learned how to feel very bad so that I didn't laugh about it. You know what I mean? I don't want to spend the rest of my life feeling bad. My mother was terrified of death, right? And so I just kind of absorbed from her. I absorbed from her a fear of spiders. And for a long time was terrified of spiders. Don't particularly like them now. For a long time, I had near phobic response to spiders. And it was interesting. One of the things that my dad said that was, I mean, he wasn't necessarily terribly supportive about it, but I think at some level he was very astute. And that he said that you're just afraid of them because your mom was afraid of them. Like he said something like that. Like it's stupid how afraid you are of those things. And I wasn't able to kind of be hurt by what he was saying because I was so interested by what he was saying. That there was a proposition, and I was probably, 6 or 7 at the time, you know. And I took literally the things that he was saying, which was that the reason that you feel that way is not because you feel that way. You feel that way because your mother feels that way, and she taught you to kind of, you know, in an effort to mimic her behavioral reactions to seeing this thing, you learned to mimic her internal experiences. Of course, that's not what he said, but it's so clear to me in retrospect, right, that in fact was true. And so the question is, I'm not afraid of spiders anymore, but when somebody cuts me off in traffic, do I have to have the, oh, what an asshole experience? You know what I mean? When the news is talking about scary things, do I have to sit there and go, do I have to go through all this stupid shit because that's what the people around me happen to do when I was growing up? And, you know, why do they do it? Well, because someone showed them how to do it, because they didn't find anything else better to do, and so it was an acceptable way to structure their time. Everyone else seemed to be doing it. Psychologically inside, they kind of ran the algorithm and they said, well, it could be bad, I could die from this, so it's not ridiculous for me to sit here and be worried about this. Is it ridiculous for me to tut and lecture? You know, we check inside because we wonder how it's going to be perceived by other people. We wonder how it's going to be perceived by us after we've done it. We run these things, right, prior to acting to evaluate whether or not we're going to act in a particular way. And so if I am kind of teeing up to think and feel and act in a way that doesn't serve me, and I run that algorithm and I say, am I going to feel totally ridiculous for having done this? Very often the answer will be no, I'm not, because I'll be able to justify it. There's sort of, you know, an element maybe of plausible deniability about the psychological second gains, you know, that I was getting from it, whatever. I'm always going to do it. And so at some point, I think that awareness and kind of like radical honesty becomes very important. Am I just fucking bullshitting myself right now? Am I engaged in underhanded, multi-level, duplicitous, psychological game playing? Am I exploiting the fact that I feel worried to justify or vindicate or reaffirm my basic existential position, my basic political beliefs, what I already thought was true about so-and-so and such and this and that? Is that what's happening here? Is there a part of me inside that goes like this and latches on to stuff that at kind of the social level, I hate that this is happening. I hate that this is happening, and I wish that they were doing a better job, but they're not doing a better job. They're doing a terrible job, and so, you know what I'm saying? That whole thing. It's so, and the more you kind of wake up to this stuff, the more obvious it is how full of shit basically everyone in the whole fucking world is, and that's including yourself, and that's a very interesting process to kind of go through, because you begin to see within yourself so much that is inauthentic, which is to say, so much that is not a pure response on your part to the reality that you're confronting or being confronted with, or that you're interacting with. So much of it is an echo of things that you've heard and saw and felt in the past, kind of generalized and repackaged and either adapted to the current situation or kind of shoehorned into it. Do you know what I'm saying? And when you begin to recognize that, you begin, what am I trying to do? Make you a better member of society? No, I don't care. I don't think society deserves better members. I think I'm trying to help people become more free and more aware, because I like it. And this is this kind of do unto others thing, right? Is that I've discovered that what it's like to be me is better when I get rid of the trash in my head and the things that I inherited from people who came before me. My life is better. You know, I mean, I just feel better. Life is better. And even the hard parts of life, the harsh parts of life, the scary, unpleasant things, the negative, the off, the dark, the shadow, whatever it is that you want to call it, even that stuff isn't so bad when I get to face it with just me. When it's just me and not me plus a bunch of trash in my head. When it's just me, I find, you know what? I actually am not that afraid of this. Or my fear of this is not really all that bad. Is that I layered a bunch of beliefs about fear and a whole bunch of beliefs about, or reactions to fear, like resisting it and all of this, that really made it terrible. But I find that the more I get back to being just me and the more I kind of shed everything that's not me, the better life is, and the more competent I am to deal with the realities that I'm facing. It's very hard to deal effectively with a challenging life circumstance when my inability to deal effectively with that challenging life circumstance serves in some way to reinforce my basic beliefs or existential position about other people being bad, about the economy being rigged, about things being unfair. It becomes very hard for me to do something other than just getting by, right? Or, it becomes very difficult for me to really actually tap into my ability to transform my little corner of reality, when my little corner of reality being a shit show and a pigsty and a mess and a just roiling kind of, just pile of shit of tragedy and misfortune and unhappiness, when that is serving in some way to reinforce some belief that somebody implanted in me, or that life somehow or another implanted in me, or induced me to take on when I was kind of growing up, it becomes very difficult for me to deal with that stuff as effectively as I otherwise could. But when it's just me and I don't have to judge what is, I'm free just to respond to it. I'm free just to look at something and say, I like it, I don't like it, I want it, I don't want it, this is for me, this isn't for me. And there's nothing that I have to add on to that. There's no program that I have to activate because I support or don't support, like or don't like, have or don't have, believe or don't believe, whatever. I'm just free just to engage with reality as it is. I don't have to form an opinion about it. I just look at it and see how it is, and then make a picture of how I want it to be, and then I set about rearranging it so that it will do that. You know what I mean? When that's what life consists of for me, life tends to be, if not fun, it's intrinsically rewarding enough that there's an inherent worthwhileness, and there's just something there that keeps me engaged long enough to produce results that make engagement feel like something I want to create and maintain, right? And that to me is sort of what it's all about.